here. Okay, so I'll pray first. Thanks for coming, everybody. Really, really appreciate your time and your commitment to your own growth and willingness to grow in your own life. Creator, I thank you for this beautiful day and for the awesome weekend that I had with my family and the loved ones and some other alcoholics and addicts who I hung out with this weekend. I ask you, Creator, to watch over our families and some of the people that are not doing so well over the holidays. That maybe you guide anybody that might need to be guided into the rooms of one of the fellowships and maybe shine your light on them, God, and help them find a light and a way out of that darkness. Creator, I ask for your patience and your pity for myself as I try to trudge this road of happy destiny the best that I can. I ask you to keep me humble in a good way, in a sacred way. I ask for your guidance tonight, Creator. Allow me to forget everything I think I know about myself, about the program, about you, God, and about my fellows. I ask for your words and your advice and all your direction tonight in order to maybe learn something tonight myself and help inspire somebody else to learn or grow in their own way. Creator, I thank you for everything that you do for me. Amen. Hi. Don't all jump at once now.
God, thank you for allowing me to attend this meeting tonight and with all the alcoholics that are here. And I pray that my higher power touches an alcoholic that's still out there practicing and touches their family in a positive way. And through your grace, get him the help he needs. And I pray for all the fallen alcoholics that we lost over the last couple of days. And I'm very grateful to be in your presence tonight as we carry this message of hope to the alcoholic who still suffers. Amen.
Thank you, Ron. Good to see you, Ron.
You
Ron's
too,
our
Billy.
friend from Ontario. Met Ron a few years ago and we've stayed in touch. Good to see your pretty face. Okay, everyone. We're going to start on page 30, more about alcoholism. Okay. So this chapter, more about alcoholism. This chapter is, it's designed specifically for some things, okay? What this chapter is designed to do. So we have a bunch of chapters in step one. I'm just going to kind of reiterate what each chapter is actually designed to do. The chapter, Doctor's Opinion, is designed to show you the allergy to alcohol. That's its main purpose. Okay, that's the main purpose of the Doctor's Opinion, is to really show you and teach you about the allergy that we have to alcohol. The next chapter is There's a Solution. That solution is there to show you the hopeless nature of the illness. That's the main purpose of There's a Solution, showing you the hopeless nature of this illness and in some ways why we need to have God in our lives. And the chapter, Bill's story, that really doesn't play a role in exactly what it's trying to show you. It's just Bill's story, which we'll do at the end of the study. And the chapter, More About Alcoholism, is designed to show you what type of thinking precedes the first drink. What type of thoughts go through my head before I pick up the first drink? And in that respect, it's also what kind of thinking goes through my head before I act out in a defective character. I like to use step one for the design for living and really emphasize what type of thinking goes through our head before we act out in anger, in lust, in self-pity, in whatever the defect might be. And we all have many, right? And we know, hopefully we know, the main reason why we pick up a substance is because we act out and we work in self. And the defects of character are just manifestations of self. The defects of character are manifestations of the spiritual malady. The spiritual malady is acting in self, living in self. And I think what I'd also like to highlight here before we get going is you can live your life with the best of intention. but the best of intention will always hide the motive. Understanding the motive in this program and in our lives is like the utmost importance. The thing that I see about this program and most of the people in it is they have no fucking idea of what self is. And unless you understand the directions contained within this book, you won't be able to identify self in a way that allows you to grow to a place that is like indescribable. Most people will just try to guess where self is and guess what God's will is. And we don't need to guess. We don't need to guess at all. There's clear-cut directions that show us, and we'll get way more into that as the study goes on. But I will touch on some of that tonight as we talk about what type of thinking precedes the first drink or the defective character. And I guess another thing, like I kind of touched on, this chapter really shows us why we need God. Like a lot of people still struggling with the substance that haven't gone through step one, and they just kind of go to meetings and they've never really understood like the allergy, the malady, and the mental blank spot or the obsession, as they call it. The people that don't understand that won't understand why we need to do steps 2 to 12 and really implement this in our lives, because they don't understand the illness. If you don't understand the illness, you won't accept all the disciplines of the program. And then you just kind of guess and find yourself drunk again. So there's a reason why we need God, and this chapter really does amplify that in a big way. So let's start reading. So more about alcoholism, chapter 3. Most of us have been unwilling to admit that we were real alcoholics. No person likes to think he is bodily and mentally different from his fellows. Therefore, it is not surprising that our drinking careers have been characterized by countless vain attempts to prove that we could drink like other people. The idea that somehow, someday he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. The persistence of this illusion is astonishing, and many pursue it to the gates of insanity or death. So just going back to the top, no person likes to think he is bodily and mentally different than his fellows. Okay, so what does that mean? The body allergy. That is one of the main things that makes me an alcoholic, is I have an allergy to alcohol. A heavy drinker doesn't have that, and a moderate drinker doesn't have that. But as soon as I put it in my body, I suffer from something that those people don't. Okay. And the other part where it talks about mentally different is I am mentally different. Okay. And some people will debate this to some degree, but I believe the alcoholic does have what I would say is a mental disorder. We have a way of thinking that is a little extreme. Like I'll kind of say it like this. Okay. You know how when you're driving your car, hey guys, you know how when you're driving your car and you're just cruising down the highway and maybe you're doing 100 kilometers an hour and it's just like, whoa, and you're just cruising along, right? That's a normal person's ego. Just whoa. You know, when you want to fucking pass somebody and you have to hit that passing gear, so you tromp on the gas and it goes, whoa, whoa. That's us. That's us all the time. We're like, wah, wah. Our egos are just a little more explosive. And really what we're doing is our instincts are actually in overdrive. And our instincts come from deep down within us. And they're our desire for sexualization, emotional, material security, and companionship. Those things are out of whack. So we want more pleasures than are possible or even due to us, right? So that will come more as we go down the road in this big book study. And the other thing, the idea that somehow, someday he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. A normal drinker doesn't try to control and enjoy their drinking. If you're trying to control and enjoy your drinking, it's abnormal, period. Normal people do not do that. Like I remember when I was drinking and using, I would try to be like, okay, I'm going to drink a 6-pack and I'm just going to buy a 6-pack tonight. And then I'm going to smoke some weed. And then I'm just going to be in that perfect spot. And maybe around midnight, maybe I'll go grab another 6-pack. And then it'll just kind of carry me till about 3 a.m. and then I'll go to bed because I got to work at 9, right? So I'm doing things like that all the time. Or I'm like really broke, right? So I'm like, okay, I'm going to grab a 6-pack. I'm going to smoke lots of joints because when I smoke lots of joints, I get drunk and I'm kind of blacked out. And then hopefully I run into somebody, I can get some more beer and some more booze later. Like, who does that kind of thing, right? Not normal people. I never knew anyone normal really think like that. So that's part of it, okay? But the thing is many pursue it to the gates of insanity or death. And that is really the crux of this. We will pursue this to the gates of insanity or death. Remember back in the doctor's opinion where these men, they make many, they talk about out of the phenomenon of craving, they may make the supreme sacrifice rather than continue to fight. Because the alcoholic that doesn't understand what they're doing, they get to a point where they think they're really messed up because they keep drinking. But then when they're not drinking, they can't not drink. And so we have a brain that needs booze or drugs, but we can't leave it alone and we can't not leave it alone. And as you go through your life and you continually hurt people and you continually hurt yourself, you can't keep jobs, you're wrecking relationships, and you just guilt yourself to this point where you don't know what to do because the people do not understand their true predicament and they end up dying, committing suicide or overdosing on purpose or whatever it is, okay? So anyway, the next paragraph, we learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost self that we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. The delusion that we are like other people presently may be has to be smashed. So we learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost self that we were alcoholic. And back in the Roland Hazard story, when Roland Hazard was talking to Carl Jung, Roland Hazard had been spending some time with Carl Jung and he learned a lot about how his mind works, right? And we can all do that. We can all learn how our mind works, okay? But Roland was drunk within a short time again, and he was baffled. He could give himself no satisfactory explanation for his fall. Why did he get drunk? He doesn't know. And then he goes back to the doctor, who was basically his higher power, and he's like, dude, how did I get drunk? And the doctor's like, dude, you're one of those hopeless alcoholics. You don't really have the power of choice, and I don't really know what to do with you. And when he was saying to Carl Jung, like, please, I'm begging you, help me, doctor. And Carl Jung's like, dude, I got nothing for you. Like, you're pretty much, I got nothing, man. And Roland, in the book, it says the gates of hell closed on Roland with a clang. Right at that moment, he conceded to his innermost self that he was fucked. And he knew that he was going to die. That was basically it. He knew he was going to die. And then the doctor went on to tell him about the vital spiritual experience. He said, once in a while, these guys can have what we call the vital spiritual experience. And Roland's like, tell me, I need that. And then he explained it to him, right? He explained those ideas, emotions, and attitudes that are the guiding forces of the lives of us have to be exposed and cast aside. And those are the same ideas, emotions, and attitudes that are our defects of character that we act out in. And unless we actually expose those things and look and see what they are. And the same thing with the defect of characters, we have to concede to our innermost self that these things are messing up our lives. The thing with these defects of character, if we can't see them, we can't acknowledge them, and we won't concede to our innermost self that we want to get rid of them. So that's what the program does. It allows you to see what it is that's running your life, and allowing you to have collision with everybody around you. But the collision isn't really with everybody around you. So if anybody here is like continually out of source with other people, the collision isn't with other people. The collision is within your own fucking mind. You have a brain that says something should be a certain way, based on your own experience in life and how you think it should be. That's not necessarily so. That's your perception. So we got to expose all those ideas, emotions, and attitudes, look at them, see how they're not serving us, cast them aside, and then allow a new set of conceptions and motives to dominate us, which isn't an easy way of life. You got to really want this stuff, okay? So as we concede to our innermost self that we're alcoholics, that's the first step in recovery. As we move forward in the defective character, we have to do the same things with the defective character. Next paragraph. No, not next paragraph, next sentence. The delusion that we are like other people or presently may be has to be smashed. So two things with that line. Back in the doctor's opinion, it talks about we are differentiated and set apart from normal people. We are not normal people. And that has to be accepted. You're not normal in the aspect of the way that you think, and you're not normal in the aspect of the allergy. But if you can distance yourself away from the substance, you don't have to worry about the allergy fucking your life. But if you're untreated and you still have the alcoholic mind, you will still suffer a lot of pain because you have an alcoholic mind. But remembering that I'm different because I have an alcoholic mind is really important. And as I go through this literature, and for me, at about 18 months to 2 years sober, I conceded to my innermost self that I was every part of this book where it describes the alcoholic and the alcoholic thinking. And then I also accepted every solution piece of the book to be the way that I'm going to live my life. And once I conceded to both those, one, I'm different and I am this. Part of that is I'm driven by 100 forms of fear and self-delusion. And we got to remember, self-delusion is something we don't talk a lot about in the program. Because if I say I'm self-delusional or you're self-delusional, that hurts your pride. But once you accept that the person, us together, as we call each other self-delusional and running in fear, it's just part of what we are. It's like I have black hair. Okay, I have black hair. I'm wearing a white hat. Oh, I'm delusional too, and I'm driven by fear. I just got to find out where it is and accept those things, because that's really important. But people's pride is so thick, they don't really want to see that stuff. But that's what I'm saying. And unless I accept that, I can't move past it. And a lot of the self-delusion contains my defective character, and it contains the perceptions of how I see life. Right? And everyone has their own self-delusion. And it has to be smashed. So what it's saying is the ego has to be smashed. And the ego is EGO. That's how you spell it. And the acronym is EGO, edging God out. And for people that know the program, and if you believe that God is love, then the ego is absence of love. And the ego is always acting in a fear. And as you live in your day-to-day life and you go and do different things in your life, you're 9 times out of 10, you're acting out in a fear. But you don't really think about it because you're not self-aware enough to really see that. But once you get self-aware enough to see it, you can peel back the layers of your good intention, because we all want to try to treat people with respect, and we want to be treated with respect. So we go through life with the best of intention, but then you got to go, whoa, whoa, whoa. Under this good intention, let's peel back some layers. There's fear there, man. So essentially, I'm running on the ego. I'm running in self. And when I run in ego and I run in self, I actually make myself feel worse. And so by the end of the day, I'm fucking exhausted. I just can't wait to go to bed, and everything's kind of pissing me off today. But I lived my life with the best of intention, but everyone else was kind of screwing me today. No, that's not really how it went. Once you sit back and you get good in inventory, you're going to be able to see where you were running the show, where the fears were running the show, and how you were making decisions based in self all along the way. That's what gets you exhausted. That's what gets us exhausted, is we run our own lives and then we get tired. So we alcoholics are men and women who have lost the ability to control our drinking. We know that no real alcoholic ever recovers control. Okay. There's part of differentiating yourself and setting yourself apart from a normal person. You will never regain control over alcohol or drugs. All of us felt at times that we were regaining control, but such intervals, usually brief, were inevitably followed by still less control. And like where I work, so I work somewhere and I work with people who struggle with addictions, and we don't really teach them any of this stuff. Okay. We just kind of let them do what they want for their own recovery. And then people get sober for a while. And this is people in the program too. They come and they get sober for a while. So they're regaining some control and they think that they have control. So they make it a little bit of time. And then what happens is they lose control again. These periods are brief and they're inevitably followed by still less control. And it just gets worse, never better. But a lot of these people that we're talking about, that I'm talking about, they don't understand step one. They don't understand they're powerless over picking it up, and they're powerless over once it's in their body. And the most important thing is I'm powerless over picking it up. Why do I pick it up? If 1,000 experiences have shown me that one more drink means another debacle, why do I pick it up? Because I don't have the power of choice and drink. Well, it's the same thing with anger. If 1,000 experiences have shown me that anger fucks up my life and my relationships all the time, makes me quit jobs, it makes me jump relationships, it makes me not see my mom and dad for a month or 2 or 3 or 6 at a time, then why do I do it? Because I'm powerless over my anger. I'm powerless over lust. You know, and another big one for men and for women is, you know, getting into relationships. You know how many people I've heard or met that said, I'm staying single. You know, I make a firm resolution and I'm staying single. A month later, I'm talking to them and they're like, yeah, I was just dating some guy or dating some chick, or, you know, I went back to my ex or whatever it is, because they're powerless over those ideas, emotions, and attitudes that are actually down inside, that actually run the show. What's running the show isn't your conscious mind at all. Your subconscious runs the show. We talk about autonomy in this program, and autonomy means the ability to govern oneself. Okay. The subconscious actually governs you. It has its own autonomy. Unbeknownst to your conscious mind, all your behaviors, your actions, and your attitudes come from a place that you can't even fucking see, which is why the anger comes up out of nowhere when I knew I didn't want to get angry, which is why lust and relationships are in my life when I don't want them there, but then I need to rationalize and justify these relationships because I acted in that. And way back in There's a Solution. I just want to touch base on this. Sometimes these excuses have a certain plausibility. We're talking about the drink, but I'm not talking about the drink. I'm talking about our behaviors. Sometimes these excuses of why I do certain things in my life, self-pity, lust, relationship hopping, sex with random people, anger, judgment, you pick your defect, road rage, but none of them really make sense in the light of the havoc the alcoholic's thinking bout creates. They sound like the philosophy of the man who has a headache, beats himself on the head with the hammer so he can't feel the headache. That was my life in relationships. I kept going back to this one relationship, and it was like beating myself on the head with a hammer. All my friends were going, why are you beating your head on yourself on the head with a hammer every 2 weeks? And then I'd give them a reason. But in the light of what always happened to me and my self-confidence and my psyche and my vibe, it didn't make any sense to them or to me. But I was powerless over that. If, next paragraph, and there's a solution, page 23. Once in a while, he may tell the truth. And every now and then I would tell the truth. And the truth, strange to say, is he usually has no more idea why he had that first think, that first sex, that first relationship hop, the call of the ex, the anger, than you have. Some thinkers have excuses which they are satisfied which part of the time. Well, sometimes I can satisfy myself with some of those excuses some of the time. But in their heart of hearts, they really do not know why they do it. In my heart of hearts, I didn't know why I kept going back there. In my heart of hearts, I did not know why I yelled at my wife. In my heart of hearts, I did not know why I got out of my car on Deerfoot Trail and punched somebody out. I didn't want to be like that. But I needed an excuse. So I needed to look in the mirror and tell myself a reason that it's okay so that I could live with myself. But when I get down underneath it all, it's just self-centered fear that I was never able to see until I came here. Once this malady has a real hold, they are a baffled lot. So once that malady of your defective character and how you think has a hold on you, you're a baffled lot. The obsession that somehow, someday they will beat the game, but they often suspect they are down for the count. And the thing with relationships is that's the biggest one, right? That's one of the biggest one. So we may even get out of a relationship that's not good for us. The thing is that enough time goes by and it's a new face. And then now it's a new journey with somebody new. So we can have a full new set of excuse of why this is a good idea. But the shit has never been dealt with, ever. So the same pattern happens over and over and over and over and over. And I've seen it in my sponsorship. These relationships last 3 months, 6 months, 8 months, maybe a year. And then the shine wears off. Why? Because the relationship was based in fear and ego. And they can tell me all they want that it was based in love, but it wasn't based in love. And then the relationship fails again. And that's how this goes, boys and girls. So let's keep going. More about alcoholism. Okay. We are inevitably followed by still less control, which in time led to pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. Think about your defects. That's what they do to you too. That's what working with porn does. That's what working with anger and these relationships do to us. We are convinced to a man that alcoholics of our type are in the grip of progressive illness. Over any considerable period of time, we get worse, never better. And typically the alcoholic who is able to put the substance down, they usually get worse, not better. And then they grasp at all the other things in their life to get the relief, right? Because the substance isn't there. So then the relationships and whatever it is, man, could be sports, could be working out, could be anything, man. Okay. It could be focusing all your time on your kids. Like the thing is all we're doing is we're putting things between us and us, and we can't look at us because our subconscious has too much fear and it won't do it, or we've never been shown a pathway to really look at ourselves. We're like men who have lost their legs. They never grow new ones. Neither does there appear to be of any kind of treatment which will make alcoholics of our kind like other men. We have tried every imaginable remedy. In some instances, there has been brief recovery, followed by still always a worse relapse. Physicians who are familiar with alcoholism agree that there is no such thing as making a normal drinker out of an alcoholic. That's really important. We will never be normal drinkers again when it comes to any substance use. Okay. Science may one day accomplish this, but it hasn't done so yet. And the thing about our society today is science, it's all over the internet. Oh, you can quit drinking and just manage your drinking and do all these things and sign up to this course and take this pill and do these things. You don't even need to quit. You can just manage it better. Well, not for us. You can go try those things, and people do try those things, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work for us. The thing that I don't get is why society doesn't look at these 12-step programs and go, this is the thing that works the best. I think I have personal opinions on why they don't look at this type of a program and really try to implement that in our society, because it's a spiritually based program and they actually don't want us to really wake up, right? So I don't want to get into a conspiracy theory discussion here, but it's, you know, it's part of it. Anyway, despite all we can say, many who are real alcoholics are not going to believe they are in that class. So that's an important line. Despite all we just said in all of step 1 literature, despite everything we just said, most people are not going to believe that they are in that class. By every form of what? Self-deception and experimentation. They will try to prove themselves exceptions to the rule. Therefore, non-alcoholic. If anyone who is showing the inability to control his drinking can do the right about face and drink like a gentleman, our hats are off to him. Heaven knows we have tried hard enough and long enough to drink like other people. And there's been many times where I've worked with a man that wanted to try it again. And I said, dude, maybe you can drink like a normal person. Go ahead. Go ahead and try. And sometimes that's the best thing that they can do, is go try. What I love to do is kind of predict their future. Like, this is probably what's going to happen, but you know what? Here's $20. I'll get you started. Here are some of the methods we have tried. Drinking beer only, limiting the number of drinks, never drinking alone, never drinking in the morning, drinking only at home, never having it in the house, never drinking during business hours, drinking only at parties, switching from scotch to brandy, drinking only natural wines, agreeing to resign if ever drunk on the job, taking a trip, not taking a trip, swearing off forever, with and without solemn oath, taking more physical exercise, reading inspirational books, going to health farms, sanitariums, accepting voluntary commitment to asylums. We can increase the list ad infinitum. Okay, let's take that to a defect, because that's what we're talking about. Okay, my life's been riddled by bad relationships, but it seems like it's only been brunettes. I'm going to try a brunette. I'm going to try a blonde. I'm going to try, and they haven't always had the best jobs. I'm going to try one that's a little, you know, making a little more money. Maybe she works out. I'm going to try this kind of woman over here instead of this one that I've normally tried. Right? Or, you know, I'm kind of been watching like this porn. I don't really want to watch that porn. I'm just going to go to strip clubs for a bit. I'm just going to check out strip clubs. I'm just going to watch soft porn on TikTok and stuff. And, you know, that'll probably make it better. Right? The thing is that you've never really accepted what the issues are. So until you accept what the issues are, the deep-rooted issues, you can't grow into a healthy relationship with yourself. However you want to use this paragraph in your life. Maybe it's jobs. Maybe you can't keep a job. Why can't you keep a job? One of the main things of an alcoholic is job hopping. You know, oh, I've had 15 jobs in the last 3 years. That's not normal. That's not really normal, right? And when you think about every time you've quit a job, when you first got the job, like, this is it. This is the one I've been waiting for. Everything's going to be great. I'm telling my mom, I'm telling my brother, my girlfriend, and everybody, like, this is the job, man. Yeah, they're paying me pretty good. I got opportunity for advancement. Everything's going to just be great here. And then in like 6 months, it's like, fuck, these guys aren't paying me enough. Don't they see how fucking hard I work? Don't they see my worth? Fuck, they don't even notice me. Fuck them. I'm fucking out of here. Then 4 months later, it's the same thing. 6 months later, it's the same thing. And that isn't the problem of the company. That's the problem internally, because I make decisions based in self that later place me in a position to be hurt. And I almost always hurt others and myself. And I burn a bridge, and I burn a bridge, and I burn a bridge. And then what happens? Then I'm always kind of still stuck where I've always been. Still doing the same old shit. Why? Because I'm running on old ideas, emotions, and attitudes that have been the guiding force of my life. And unless I expose those things, look at them, and fucking be willing to cast them aside and try a whole new set of conceptions and motives to dominate me, I will not have a psychic change. The psychic change is imperative to not drinking, but the psychic change is utmostly imperative to a good life and listening to God and Creator. There's a fine line in your intuition in life between trauma and old idea intuition and actual intuition. I've met a lot of people that run on their intuition, and it is not intuition. It's fear. But they think it's intuition. Intuition isn't based in fear. Intuition is based in God consciousness and love for yourself. And it's a fine line, man. Okay. Let's keep going. Bottom of 31. We do not like to pronounce any individual as alcoholic, but you can quickly diagnose yourself. Step over to the nearest barroom and try some controlled drinking. Try to drink and stop abruptly. Try it more than once. It will not take you long to decide. If you are honest with yourself about it, it may be worth a bad case of the jitters if you get a full knowledge of your condition. So what the book is doing right here, back to the substance for a minute, the book is trying to show you in two different ways how you can prove you're an alcoholic. Despite all we can say, many of you are not going to believe you're in that class. So that's what it's saying. Okay, despite that, you're still not going to believe that you're an alcoholic. So it says, okay, if you don't believe you're an alcoholic, go try this. And it says, go try some controlled drinking. Go to the nearest bar, order some drinks and try to stop abruptly. Try to do this more than once. It won't take you long for you to decide if you're an alcoholic. And it might be worth it so you can get a full knowledge so you can understand what the fuck you're dealing with. That's what it's saying. Okay? Though there is no way of proving it, we believe that early in our drinking careers, most of us could have stopped drinking. But the difficulty is that few alcoholics have enough desire to stop while there is yet time. And how many young people have you met that, they should stop drinking? You can see that, this 20-year-old kid's on a bad path, man. He should probably stop drinking. And he probably knows that it's causing him some pain. The difficulty is that few alcoholics have enough desire to stop while there's yet time. We have heard of a few instances where people showed definite signs of alcoholism were able to stop for a long period because of an overpowering desire to do so. Here's one. Okay, so this story is this carpet slipper story. Okay, it's carpet slipper guy's story. And this is actually my story. I don't really like this story, honestly. I don't really like to talk about it in my big book studies at all. And why? Because it gives the person who might be in this room that little bit of hope that they might be this guy. So when I do my studies with Jesse, we almost like the story is invisible. But I'll talk about it a little bit because this is actually my story. A man of 30 was doing a great deal of spree drinking. He was very nervous in the morning, and after these bouts, he quieted himself with some more liquor. He was ambitious to succeed in business, but saw that he would get nowhere if he drank at all. Once he started, he had no control whatever. He made up his mind that until he had been successful in business and had retired, he would not touch another drop. An exceptional man, he remained bone dry for 25 years and retired at the age of 55. After a successful, happy business career, he then fell victim to a belief which practically every alcoholic has, that his long period of sobriety and self-discipline had qualified him to drink as other men. Out came his carpet slippers and a bottle. In 2 months, he was in a hospital, puzzled and humiliated. He tried to regulate his drinking for a while, making several trips to the hospital in the meantime. Then he gathered all of his forces and he attempted to stop altogether and found that he could not. Every means by solving his problem, which money could buy, was at his disposal. Every attempt failed. Though a robust man at retirement, he went to pieces quickly and was dead within 4 years. So how my story relates to this guy. So this guy quit drinking, and for 25 years, he didn't have a drink. He wasn't going to drink till he was successful in business. And then he did, and he couldn't stop. And he had so much money, and he could hire all the psychologists and try all these fancy things that are out there in the world now. And it didn't work. And he was dead within a few years, within 4 years, it says, because he didn't understand his true predicament, right? So for me, I quit drinking when I was 22 years old, and I quit on a prayer. And I never had a drink ever again in my life till today. I haven't still drinking since I was 22, and I'm 50 now. But what happened with me is my untreated alcoholism, I just quit on my own, not with God or program or anything. All my disease did, it went into pride and ego, went into money, it went into status, into trucks, into shiny things. It went into staying busy. And all I did was blind myself from looking at myself, but I didn't know. I didn't know. And all as I was getting was relief, relief, relief. But the thing was, is I wasn't really getting the relief that I needed because I was still angry. I remember grabbing guys that worked for me, holding them up against the fence posts, ready to fucking kill them. I remember dragging guy out of the backhoe and boot fucking him on the job site. And he worked for me. You can't do that to guys that work for you. But I was powerless. You know, I'd go home and, you know, my wife would keep the kids in the kitchen and say, okay, dad's like had a bad day. Just don't bug him tonight. And I'd be watching hockey and they'd come and dance in front of the hockey game. And I'd be like, ah, what are you guys doing? Get out of here. Like Shannon, my wife, would be like, kids, fuck, don't do that. Because she's going to pay the price, right? If my kids are fucking with me, fucking up my hockey game, Shannon's paying the price later. Trust me. She knew that, right? Because I'm an untreated alcoholic addict. And even while I was with my wife, like, and I don't talk about this much, later in that relationship, I was going to fucking hookers. I was doing the stupidest shit that I didn't want to do, but I was powerless over fucking doing this stuff. And then when it got to the end, I just had given up, right? It's kind of like the alcoholic who just gives up and just drinks for oblivion and they hope to die. That was kind of like me with all my defects. I didn't even care anymore about anything. I knew I didn't like myself. I knew I wasn't able to be cured. I didn't know what was wrong with me. So I just let it all go until I, you know, nearly died, right? So then what happened was I ended up going out to Winnipeg with my dad to look for my brother. Some of you might have heard this story, and I haven't had a drink in years, right? And I had to go in this crack house and I had to have a hoot of crack because the guys at this house needed me to prove that I wasn't a narc. So they said, here, smoke some crack, prove you're not a narc, and you can come in the house and look for your brother. So I did. Couple of quick hoots of that crack, didn't know what it really was, never did it before, and I did it, and then found my brother the next day, came back to Calgary. I didn't know, but I had set off the allergy in the body. And then I couldn't stop thinking about crack, and I hated crack. And then that was the end of it. But workaholism quit working, like the alcohol quit working, work quit working, hookers quit working, porn quit working, work quit working, money quit working, shiny stuff quit working. And then I found a new thing that worked, which was crack, until it didn't work. And then there are many situations which arise out of the phenomenon of craving, which cause men to make extreme sacrifice rather than continue to fight. By the end of it, I was ready to drive into oncoming semis. The thoughts that I had about driving off these cliffs and shit as I'm driving around a corner, like I can't even believe that I thought like that because I don't think like that. But these thoughts started coming into my head. And that's what we're talking about, right? So I am the carpet slipper guy. I didn't have a drink for many years. Then I had one hoot of crack, and then I was off to the races. And then all hell broke loose. So anyway, let's keep reading. This case contains a powerful lesson. Most of us have believed that if we remain sober for a long stretch, we could thereafter drink normally. But here was a man who at 55 years found he was still where he'd left off at 30. We have seen the truth demonstrated again and again. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. Commencing to drink after a period of sobriety, we are in short time as bad as ever. If we're planning to stop drinking, there must be no reservation of any kind. And it's the same with the relationship you're in, with hopefully porn or smoking or anger. If you really want to work on what it is, try to have no reservation of any kind, especially in the relationships, because those ones we always have a reservation in. Or any lurking notion that someday we'll be immune to alcohol. And the other thing that I want to point out about this paragraph is commencing to drink after a period of sobriety, we're in short time as bad as ever. So a lot of people, this disease is a disease that tells you you don't have the disease. A good way to remember we have this disease is to continually go to meetings. I don't go to meetings today essentially because the meetings are keeping me sober. Okay. I don't go to meetings to stay sober, period. I go to meetings so I can run into a newcomer and go, yes, you're the most important guy in the room today for me, because I do not want that ever again in my life, and I need to be reminded. And I also go to meetings to see the dry, drunken alcoholic who doesn't have a program, who's been sober for 20 or 30 years or 5 years, who's fucking all the newcomers, who's beating up other people in the room, who's miserable, who doesn't have any friends. I go there to go, that's what happens if I don't work with Creator in my life. And to me, the most important person in the room is not the newcomer. It's the person who's done the first set of steps, or they've been sober a little while, but doesn't understand really what we're doing here and working with the defective character. That's, to me, the most important person in the room. And when you look at, this room here tonight, we are all been around a while, right? Most of us aren't brand new. And it's because we want something more, right? That's my focus, is to try to help people stay here, become of service to their fellow, become of service to God, understand your true predicament, work on these defects of character, and try to grow and be of service to God so that, you give me a hand with sponsoring. And the women can give other women a hand, because it's so lopsided in the rooms where like 5% of the women are sponsoring 95% of the other women, right? That's what's happening. And even with the guys, it's like that too, but it's not quite as bad. There's a lot more guys helping out. But that's kind of the deal, right? Okay, let's go into the middle paragraph. We'll take a break in about 10 minutes. Young people may be encouraged by this man's experience to think that they can stop as he did on their own power. We doubt if many of them can do it, because none will really want to stop. And hardly one of them, because of the peculiar mental twist already acquired, will find that he can win out. Several of our crowd, men of 30 or less, had been drinking only a few years, but they found themselves as helpless as those who had been drinking 20 years. To be gravely affected, one does not necessarily have to drink as long, nor take the quantity some of us have. This is particularly true of women. Potential female alcoholics often turn into the real thing and are gone beyond recall in a few years. Certain drinkers who would be greatly insulted if called alcoholics are astonished at their inability to stop. We who are familiar with the symptoms see large numbers of potential alcoholics among young people everywhere, but try to get them to see it. And that's true, man. Try to get a young person to see that they're suffering from alcohol. It's pretty difficult because they're tied so much into their peer group system, and they think they're invincible because they're so young still, right? Like, how old are you, Wyatt? 22. And how long did it take you to finally concede to your innermost self that you had this? Did your brain play games with you saying, no, I'm too young to have this? Mm-hmm. So you get that line, right? And that's it. And I'm glad you're here, Wyatt. I'm glad 22 years old, folks. Wyatt in our room here, you know, seeking the solution like a dying man. And he knows that if he doesn't, he probably will wind up dead, right? But he's got a whole shitload of friends who he sees this in them, but they don't see it and they're not ready to stop. And that's okay, because you can be the shining light for them, right? Anyway, let's keep going. As we look back, we feel we had gone on drinking many years beyond the point where we could quit on our own willpower. If anyone questions whether they has entered into this dangerous area, let them try leaving liquor alone for 1 year. Okay, so here we are at the second spot where Bill W., the author, talks about how you can prove that you're an alcoholic in another way. Despite all we can say, many are not going to believe they're in that class. Well, here's the other way that Bill W. is trying to get you to look at yourself, okay? And he's like, let him try leaving liquor alone for a year. If he is a real alcoholic and very far advanced, there is scant chance of success. In the early days of our drinking, we occasionally remained sober for a year or more, becoming serious drinkers again later. Though you may be able to stop for a considerable period, you may yet be a potential alcoholic. Okay, I want to talk about that for a second. So I sponsor a lot of people in the program. I go to lots of meetings in this program, and I see exactly what the book is saying. Hardly anybody, if they don't work the steps, will stay sober anything like a year. They're either smoking weed and then eventually drink, or they're doing something else, or like very rarely do they stay sober a year. Almost never. And if they can make it a year, almost never do they make it 2 years without doing something spiritual. And typically, I'm going to say, working these steps. I don't see people stay sober, man, if they don't work the steps. It just doesn't work like that. There might be the odd person who can. Like the book does say, like, you know, there's the odd guy that might be able to do it on his own power. And maybe there is, but I don't see them. And even if they are able to stay sober and not have substances, they're just settling for the crumbs anyway. Sobriety is different than recovery. Sobriety is like settling for the crumbs of the cake and fucking scooping them all up into a pile and then trying to eat them with your fingers. Like, who fucking wants to do that? Like, I want the big piece and I want to eat it with a fork, and I want big mouthfuls of this shit, right? I want the God dope, full mouthfuls. And that's what the steps do. They take everything that's not God away from my life, and they allow me to work with my greatest power that actually is inside me, which is God. So that's important, man. That's so important. And like, because most people don't sponsor, it's funny because I'll have these conversations with people in the program, and they'll tell me things like, well, you don't really know what you're talking about. That's pretty heavy judgment on what you're saying, and blah, 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 blah. And then I'm like, okay, how long you been around? And he's like, well, fuck, I've been around for like 15 years. I'm like, well, how much time you got? Well, I got 6 months. I'm like, oh, how many guys have you sponsored? Well, I don't sponsor. Well, how many meetings do you go to? I go to like 1 meeting a week. Like, there's not even a comparison. And I'm not here to compare myself, but the data that I collect and the data that he collects, it's two different pieces of data. But I get that, you know, people kind of trying to say certain things like that. But at the end of the day, it's not even comparable data. I see people that don't do the steps drink again, period. That's how it goes. Fuck. Anyway, we think few to whom this book will appeal can stay dry anything like a year. So Bill is just reiterating what I'm saying. I'm reiterating what he's saying, I should say. Some of us will be drunk the day after making resolutions, many of them within a few weeks. Why is it that so many people go to treatment and hardly any of them stay sober? Because of this. Most treatment centers don't even get you to finish the steps. They get you to step 4 usually, maybe 5. They get you to go and do a 5 with somebody you don't even know. So really you're reading your step 4 that you were rushed to do, and you're doing a confession to somebody because you got, what is it? I think you get 3 or 4 hours to do a 4, 5, 6, and 7 out of treatment. 4 hours to do 4, 5, 6, and 7. Of course you're going to drink. There's not recovery in that. The shelf life of something like that is a month or maybe 6 months. And then that person's drunk. Like, seriously, treatment centers do not have high recovery rates of success because they're not doing the deep work that we do. And they don't spend the time explaining this like I'm explaining it. Most guys that I've worked with, like that have been in treatment centers many times, I'll do a step 1 with them. And they're like, fuck, they never taught us this. Or the other thing they never taught them was they never taught them how important step 6 is. Nobody in treatment centers ever has said, you know what, they taught me that step 6 is the most important step. Never have I heard that, ever. So treatment center is just a place where you go get some structure. You distance yourself from a substance. The minute you walk out of a treatment center, then that's when recovery begins. Because that's where the spiritual malady is going to hit you, because now you're back in life. And we're recovering from a spiritual malady. We're not recovering from a substance. We're recovering from a spiritual malady. Remember back in the beginning of the study, the word recovery means the process of becoming well again after an injury or an illness. I'm becoming well again after my illness of a spiritual malady. That's an ongoing process because I have my whole life that built the malady. Now I spend the rest of myself working myself out of the malady. And I can only do it on a day-to-day basis, but I actually do it on a micro minute-by-minute basis is what the directions show me. The problem with the program in general as a watered-down version is it just gives you the philosophy of what we're trying to do. Just be kind. Just be loving. Just be like these things. But that is like you're self-willing the principles into your life still. So you're still running it with self-will. You don't need to run it with self-will. There's a set of directions here. You're aware of your will. You ask God to remove it. You talk to somebody. You make amends. Then you resolutely turn your thoughts to someone you can help. We're talking about step 10 here. It's clear and it fucking works. And why am I so passionate as I sit here and I talk about it? Because I see it work. It worked in my life. It works in my life. It works for the people that I show. And I see it working. But if people don't know what these pieces of the puzzle are, they just self-will the theory of the program into their life. So then God is just a theory too. And when God's just a theory, we run our lives based on the best of intention, and we're still fighting everyone and everything, and we don't ever know what the 4th dimension really is. And if you really want to know if your recovery's strong and you're living what the program's offering, look at the step 9 promises. And don't bullshit yourself to make it match your life. Fucking look at the promises and go, is that happening in my life? Is each of those promises actually in my life today? Because if they're not, which most people they aren't, but if you work in the 4th dimension and you follow the directions, those promises change and they become something different than some lines that I can agree to. They're lines that are living within me, and I can see that. So let's take a break. We'll come back in like 10 minutes. So we're going to keep going here. I just got to find out where I was. Okay. 34, middle of the page. Just for everyone online, I got a seashell given to me at halftime. We're smudging down here, so you're missing out on the smudge. Okay. For those who are unable to drink moderately, the question is how to stop altogether. Well, that's us. We're assuming, of course, that the reader desires to stop. Whether a person can quit upon a non-spiritual basis depends to the extent which they have already lost the power to choose whether he will drink or not. Okay. I'd like you to underline that or highlight it or something, because it's a line that goes like not seen, but really listen to what I'm saying when I read this line. So whether a person can quit upon a non-spiritual basis depends upon to the extent which they have already lost the power to choose whether they will drink or not. So some people can quit with less spirituality than others because they haven't gone as far, right? So a moderate drinker doesn't need much spirituality at all because he hasn't lost that ability like we have. A heavy drinker might need more spirituality, but a real deal alcoholic needs lots of spirituality. And some of us are actually worse than others. So what works for like me, somebody else may need more. And they may need to work a harder, more serious, disciplined program than I do. So it's kind of like exactly what it says. Whether such a person can quit upon a non-spiritual basis depends to the extent which they have already lost the power to choose whether they will drink or not. Okay, so now I'm going to flip this to the ego and defective character. Whether a person can quit on a non-spiritual basis, quit their ego, relinquish their ego on a non-spiritual basis, depends to the extent which they identify themselves to the ego. So to the extent that somebody identifies their being to who they think they are based in the ego will mean that they need way more spiritual help to relinquish the ego. Because there's people that can kind of go, okay, they think that they are everything about their ego. They identify with the world of the material in the aspect of like the money and how important money is, and like clothing and how they look, and like the jobs and the validation from others. And then there's people that don't care as much about those things. And the people that I really identified with their ego or the broken parts of themselves, I'm going to say a lot of people are really involved in their own trauma, right? They really are tied to the trauma in the past of what has happened to them. They're tied to their ego. And these people that have the deep-rooted trauma issues, they have a harder time getting sober because their ego attaches to those fears and to those happenings. So they need to go deeper and look at things deeper and be, in some ways, more willing to relinquish. And in some aspects, it's more painful for those people. But it kind of is also based on, are you willing to go there on your own and do the work? And if you're really willing to go down in those deep spots and do that work, you can actually relieve yourself of a lot of the burden of the pain of the journey than if you don't let go. Does that make sense at all? Roger. 10-4. And I don't like advise anybody really, I think this program does an organic stripping away of the trauma. I don't ever advise anybody, honestly, to ever go and do straight trauma work. I don't advise that with people at all. But our society, that's a big seller today. They're like, okay, let's do this deep-rooted trauma work on you people. Come on in and we're going to do this trauma work. And we're just the fish in water. And we're like, oh, fuck, let's do it. Then we go into these trauma courses, and then they start going into the depths of our pain and trauma, and they start stirring up all this shit and bringing it up to the light, but it has no business being there. So then you just stirred up a whole bunch of shit in your deep subconscious that you don't know what to do with. But because you had a 3-week trauma course, by the time you're done, you think that you're better, but really they left you hanging with all these things that you don't know what to do with, and it's beyond your mental, logical mind. It's deep. Totally. So Brandon was saying that like this is an organic process of stripping away the layers of the trauma so that you're able to deal with the shit as the shit comes up. And the thing about what we're doing here is we're not bringing the light down to the dark. The dark is coming to the surface to the light when it's ready. And by somebody that works a really good, solid program, they're able to deal with the shit when the shit comes up. Because if you're not able to deal with the shit when the shit comes up, the shit will deal with you, right? So for example, last night it was Christmas and I had to go do a 12-step call essentially. They weren't going to drink or anything, but it was somebody that was really struggling. And this person had been sober for many years, like 7 or 8 years. This is a while back, okay, about 3 years ago. And then they tried to commit suicide, sober. And within that year, they ended up drinking again. And really what happened was this person never really, the first thing I asked her was like, do you know what step 10 is? And she's like, no, what is it? And like that, to me, that's a symptom, right? If you don't know what step 10 is, step 10 deals with things as it comes up. Step 10 is the process of dealing with the shit when the shit comes up. It's dealing with self constantly because you don't need to run the show. If you're dealing with step 10 properly, you won't run the show. But if you don't know what step 10 is, then you live your life with the best of intention. You're running into everything and everybody causing friction, and you're never able to deal with the shit when the shit comes up. And then suicide seems like a good option at 7 years sober. And then because suicide doesn't work and nothing else is working, I need to pick up a drink. But I know that that's not going to be the solution either. But there are many situations which arise out of the phenomenon of craving, which cause men to make the supreme sacrifice rather than continue to fight. People will kill themselves. Okay? So you don't need to go down and get the self-relief. We're all looking for relief, right? We're relief seekers. We want to be better right now. You can't get better right now. The getting better comes through a consistent, persistent commitment to show up, to suit up, and to look at yourself and to talk to people that care about you and to do the inventory and to pray and to meditate and then seek outside. Be quick to see where religious people are right and integrate other spiritual components into your life. But don't make those other spiritual components number one, in my opinion. Make this the foundation. And then later in like 5 years or 10 years, you can do whatever you want in the spiritual realm because you'll have this as a working part of your mind. But it takes time, man. Like I will say again, and I say it many times, it takes 2 or 3 years of working serious, solid program, doing what we're doing here tonight to even begin to understand self. And if you can dig in for the first 2 or 3 years and try to understand what self is and start relinquishing it and seeing what it is, you're the rest of your life's kind of like a cakewalk. And I don't mean that like that nothing's going to happen that's bad, but you're able to deal with it. And you got the tools to live a successful life and not fight yourself. And then in turn, not fight everybody else. But most people don't do that. They come here, they get some relief, they do a set of steps, they go out there and get on with the business of being self-satisfied. They're working with the philosophy and the theory and the principles of the program, thinking that they're working the program, but really they're running their own life, and then they're drunk again. Is it by mistake that most people don't make it 2 years sober? Like 5 out of 100 make it a year. 2.5 out of 100 make it to 5 years. 2.5% make it 5 years sober. But it doesn't have to be that way. The book says that 50% should stay sober, 25% with some relapses, but should get sober, and the other 25% should live a better quality of life. And not to toot my own horn, but the sponsorship that I'm doing, 6 or 7 out of 10 are staying sober long-term, and they're doing really well. Same with my buddy, Jesse. And I know some people in here who are sponsoring, and the better you get at sponsoring, the more that your success rate as a sponsor will come up, because the directions really reveal themselves in your understanding and effectiveness as a human in your own life, but as a sponsor in other people's lives, showing them the clear-cut directions, because it's the directions that actually do the trick. It's not the philosophies. Okay, let's keep going. Okay. There was the tremendous urge to cease forever, yet we found it impossible. This was the baffling feature from alcoholism as we know it. This utter inability to leave it alone, no matter how great the necessity or the wish. That's alcohol and drugs. It's also relationships. It's also pornography. It's also gambling. It's also judgment. It's also self-hate. It's also self-pity. Okay? Because we do want to leave all those things alone that I just said, no matter how great the necessity or wish, but we can't. I have an utter inability to leave it alone, no matter how great the necessity or wish. How then shall we help our readers determine to their own satisfaction whether they are one of us? The experiment of quitting for a period of time will be helpful, but we think we can render even a greater service to alcoholic sufferers, and perhaps to the medical fraternity. So we shall describe some of our mental states that precede the relapse into drinking, for obviously this is the crux of the problem. So at the beginning of this chapter, I talked about what type of thinking precedes the first drink. What type of thinking precedes the first act into your defective character? That's kind of what we're talking about. And it does say for this, obviously, this is the crux of the problem. This is the crux of the problem. This is where the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind, rather than his body. So what sort of thinking dominates an alcoholic who repeats time after time the desperate experiment of the first drink? Friends who have reasoned with him after a spree which has brought him to the point of divorce or bankruptcy are mystified when he walks directly into the saloon. Why does he? Of what is he thinking? Our first example is a friend we shall call Jim. This man has a charming wife and family. He has inherited a lucrative automobile agency. He has a commendable World War record. He is a good salesman. Everybody likes him. He is an intelligent man, normal so far as we can see. Except for a nervous disposition, he did no drinking until he was 35 years old. In a few years, he became so violent when intoxicated that he had to be committed. On leaving the asylum, he came into contact with us. So this guy has everything a guy would want in his life. He's got the job, he's got the wife, he's been inherited a lucrative automobile agency. The guy's got it all, man. So we told him what we knew of alcoholism and the answer that we had found. So we came to the rooms and we told them what we knew of alcoholism and the answer that we had found and what helped us. And he made a beginning. And when you know the book, back in ahead in step 3, it talks about doing the step 3 prayer. And then it said this was a beginning. So I'm assuming that Jim did the first 3 steps. So he came here, opened the book, did step 1, 2, and 3. He made a beginning. His family was reassembled. He began to work as a salesman for the business he has lost through drinking. And circle or underline, all went well for a time. So this guy makes a beginning. He's not drinking. He's starting to work with some spiritual principles. People see the change. He gets his wife back. He's working again. Things are going pretty good. And it even says all went well for a time. But he failed to what? To enlarge his spiritual life. Yeah, basically he didn't do step 4 through 12. Right? So he failed to enlarge his spiritual life. He was acting on this idea of God that he thought that he had because he did a step 3. He got on his knees, maybe even prayed and, you know, God help me, fucking relieve me of the bondage of self, and everything's good. And he moves on with his life. The problem with this guy is he's never relinquished his ego. And he doesn't even know what his life and his will is, because your life and your will doesn't even reveal itself until step 4. And even when you do your first 2 step 4s, you're just clearing barely the surface off of what self really is. But it's really profound in the first couple of times you do it because you've never seen it like that before. So it is really impactful. But over the long journey of long-term recovery and long-term working on the spiritual malady, it's like a snippet of what actually has to happen over time. And when we talk about these steps in the rooms, everyone talks about doing a set of steps and then that's it. Or let's talk about the 4th column on your resentments. Well, the 4th column is fine, but it fucking isn't everything. It's not even close to everything. It's like a snippet of actually what's wrong. The 3rd column's more important as you seek long-term sobriety, recovery, working on the malady. The 3rd column is where the roots are. The 3rd column is where the trauma is. 3rd column is where the ideas, emotions, and attitudes are. 3rd column is where the self-delusion is and the fear. That needs to be extracted and brought out. You can continually look at the 4th column and go, why isn't anything changing? And I see this in the program all the time. Like, fuck, is this all that it is? Is this all sobriety is? I thought it would be better than this. Well, it is better than that. You just fucking don't know what you're doing. You think that it's this, but it's actually not even close to that, bro. It's something deeper. And if you're willing, here it is. We'll show you, right? The problem is that most of the rooms aren't able to show you because most of the rooms don't even know what it is. But it is getting a little bit better. Yeah, I was going to read you a text that some guy sent me a while back, but I won't. Okay. Okay, Jim. All went well for a time, but he failed to enlarge his spiritual life. To his consternation, he found himself drunk 6 times in rapid succession. On each of these occasions, we worked with him, reviewing carefully what had happened. He agreed that he was a real alcoholic and in serious condition. He knew that he faced another trip to the asylum if he kept going. Moreover, he would lose his family for whom he had deep affection. So he knows. He's using an effective mental defense and he knows all this stuff that we all know. Yet, he got drunk again. Why was this? Well, we asked him to tell us exactly how it happened. Here's the story. So Jim came into work on Tuesday morning. What happened to Monday? I remember I felt irritated. So he's already irritated, right? I had to be a salesman for a concern I once owned. He's resentful already. I had a few words with the boss, but nothing serious, right? So he's sweeping his defects under the carpet because he doesn't know any better. Then he decided to drive to the country to see one of the prospects for a car. On the way, I felt hungry, so I stopped at a roadside place where they have a bar. I had no intention of drinking. I just thought I would get a sandwich. I also had the notion that I might find a customer for a car at this place, which I was familiar for. I'd been going to it for years. I had eaten there many times during the months. I was sober, so I sat down at the table and I ordered a sandwich and a glass of milk. Still no thought of drinking. I ordered another sandwich and I decided to have another glass of milk. Suddenly, the thought crossed my mind that if I were to put an ounce of whiskey in my milk, it couldn't hurt me on a full stomach. So I ordered the whiskey and I poured it into the milk. I vaguely sensed I wasn't being any too smart, but I felt reassured I was taking the whiskey on a full stomach. The experiment went so well that I ordered another whiskey and I poured it into more milk. That didn't seem to bother me, so I tried another. Thus started one more journey to the asylum for Jim. Here was the threat of commitment, the loss of his family and his job, to say nothing of the intense mental and physical suffering, the detoxing, which drinking has always caused him. He had much knowledge about his illness. Yet for all reasons for not drinking were easily pushed aside in favor of the foolish idea that he could take a whiskey if he only mixed it with milk. So when we talk about the insanity of step 2, there's 2 insanities that we talk about. The first one is came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. The insanity is that I think a drink is a good idea and I pick it up. So I need God in my life to match the insane thought of picking up a drink with the sane thought not to drink. That's the real insanity. I go to the rooms all the time and I hear people say, yeah, I'm fucking insane. It's insanity. I'm just insane. That's not what the fuck we're talking about. Okay? That's not what we're talking about. That can come later in aspects of this program, but we're talking about what it says right here. Easily pushed aside. He pushes the thoughts of not drinking aside with the idea that he could take whiskey if he only mixed it with milk. Whatever the precise definition of the word insanity may be, we call this plain insanity. How can such of a lack of proportion, the ability to think straight, be called anything else? So we need this power that we source through the step work, not through a ego contact with it, through the step work where God works in and through us. Through that experience with God, he will match the same think not to drink with my insanity to want to drink. But it doesn't happen if I don't work the steps. And that's why you see people at meetings, they'll be at the podium on Wednesday saying, me and God are so tight, I'm sober by the grace of God. And I've only done step 3 or I've done step 8 or whatever. And then on Friday, I'm coming back. I drank again. And I spent many hours trying to figure out, how does this happen? And I came to some conclusions. The ego attaches to the idea of God. And the ego is very, very powerful. And the ego does never want to be left out. And when you look at the ego overall in our lives, some of the things that I've learned about from a sponsorship perspective in my own life is I always want validation from my fellows. I want emotional security from you and other people. So when I'm in a room of alcoholics, I want that too. So I want God just as much as you guys do. So then I think I'm attached to God, but it's really just my ego. So then I've made it 4 months with this relationship that I think is me and God working really tight. And I told you on Wednesday how tight we are, but it's Friday and here I am drunk. Well, what God really was God was an effective mental defense against the first drink. It wasn't God actually running anything at all. And the book says that at a certain point, the alcoholic will have no effective mental defense against the first drink. And so this guy didn't have an effective mental defense because the ego attachment to the idea of God was not enough. And he picked up against his own will. And he's drunk. So I want to go back to this suddenly paragraph. The reason we need God is to like combat suddenly. Because suddenly is really important. This doesn't happen by like, oh, maybe it does for some people. I'm going to put a lot of thought into my relapse. I'm going to kind of plan this out. And then on Saturday, I'm going to drink. Sometimes we do that. But more often than not, we're convinced that we can't drink and we shouldn't drink and we don't want to drink. But the suddenly part of this is really important because you don't really have a chance. It's like driving down the road and all of a sudden a thunderstorm starts. And it's like suddenly it's hailing. You have no power over stopping that hailstorm because you have no control over it. It's the same thing with drinking. The drink is the hailstorm. You're just going about your life and then suddenly, boom, you're like, holy shit, I'm drinking. How did this happen? If you work with God in your life through the directions, that insane suddenly may come up as a thought, but God somehow matches it with the sameness not to drink. And the thought of suddenly is fleeting and it's lost and you can move on with your day. And you don't think about it again. But what I want to point out here is here's the type of thinking that precedes the first drink, okay? So here's Jim. So he has this thought cross his mind if they were putting down a whiskey in his milk. He has the thought of alcohol. Boom. Right now. And then he has an insane trivial excuse. Let's put it in my milk. And what? It couldn't hurt me on a full stomach. There's his insane trivial excuse. Who fucking does that? An alcoholic. Yeah, let's put some whiskey in my milk. It's not going to hurt me on a full stomach. Right? That's insanity. Okay. And then, but he says, well, I vaguely sensed, so here's the God part in him. I vaguely sensed I wasn't being any too smart. So he felt that, but he did it anyway. But felt reassured. So let's rationalize that I was taking the whiskey on a full stomach. So the experiment went so well that he tried another. So what I want to highlight here is the thought of drink, boom, married with an insane trivial excuse. It's like the thought of drink, boom, full stomach, boom, he's drunk. That's how this happens. That's as quick as it happens. And you don't have the power of choice when those two thoughts marry each other. You're as good as drunk if you're not in fit spiritual condition. And my experience is driving down the road, I see the Banff Trail Motel, I see the hotel, I think of crack, I think I got about 3 hours to kill, boom, I'm in the hotel getting fucking high. Because I saw the hotel, I thought of crack, and I had 3 hours. That all happened within like milliseconds of my thinking, and my phone was in my hand, and I'm waiting in the hotel for the dealer. And then my whole week is fucked. Now I'm lying and doing all these shady things. And now the spree's on because now I set it off. I need to stop my illness at the thought of seeing the Banff Trail Motel, thinking about crack, and the 3 hour period where I can do something with. I need to stop it there. But I can't will myself to stop it. I have done that. I've been like, okay, there's the Banff Trail Motel, 3 hours, crack. Oh, fuck, force my truck to the right, go to the job site, shovel angrily for the next 4 hours, and I avoided it. But I really didn't avoid anything. What I did is I resisted it. And because I resist it, it persists. And then I will succumb to the desire. I failed to resist, and I'm fucking high again, whenever that might be. So I'm going to reread this in the defective character. So I had no intention of drinking. I thought I would just go to my old ladies and say hi, my ex-girlfriends. I'm just going to go to my ex-girlfriends and say hi, right? I also had the notion that I might find she might feed me. I'm fucking hungry, right? She's a pretty good woman. There's been times where we've gone along. She's a good cook. I know I'm calling her unbeknownst, but I'm just going to go see my ex-girlfriend for a minute and just say hi. She's got some kids. I want to say hi to the kids, even though when I really look at the facts, why the fuck am I not with her anyway? Well, look at the facts. This is how it goes. How many times have I broken up with her? Like 20. What am I doing? Well, I can do that with anything, right? So then he sits down at the table. Hey, babes, can you feed me? Yep. He had no thought of fucking her. He didn't even want to fuck her, it says. And then the thought crossed my mind. Holy shit, look at that ass. Next thing you know, they're in the bedroom, the kid's in the playpen, and they're in for a quickie, and now it's all started again. Right? That's how it goes. Right? And it can go like that with that. It can go like that with porn. It's like, okay, I'm going to get the app off my phone. But now I'm going to just search this, or I'm going to do this, or it doesn't matter what it is. Okay, I'm a gambler. I'm just going to go grab a sandwich at the Grey Eagle today. They have a soup special. They have a seafood and soup special today. And it's really cheap. It's like $9.99, and I'm really hungry. And then I'm just sitting there, right? But I knew. When I get honest with myself, I know. That's why rigorous honesty is the key component of step one. It's rigorous, means accurate, because we can rationalize and justify the most errant bullshit to suit every action in our life and every inaction in our life, which is why it's so important to talk to God-centered 12-step pillars. Do inventory on your thoughts, not inventory based in the lies you're telling yourself, because I can easily, and I have done it, an inventory on the lie, because I don't really want to admit the lie to myself, because I have pride and I want to make it look a certain way. But I have a buddy named Jesse, and when I bring something to Jesse, this guy's skilled, man. And he asks me the questions. And I'm a great manipulator. So I can manipulate the answers so that I don't get asked certain questions, right? But Jesse's seen right through all of the shit because he's worked with so many people. He asks me all the little questions. And then I have to answer them because I can't lie. And then I get busted. I bust myself. That's why it's so important for us to talk to people before we go and make decisions in our life. When you get the insane thought to see your old lady, or to go on porn, or to go to the Gray Eagle, or you're in a resentment, or whatever, make the call, because you're not capable of it on your own. We are driven by self-delusion and fear, self-seeking, self-pity. We're driven. When you look up the word driven, it means an unseen, powerful force that pushes something. It's an unseen, powerful force that pushes me to do these things. That is the autonomy of the subconscious, of which I actually have no control. But when I act out in that, I'm going to give you one of 100 alibis. Sometimes these things have a plausible excuse. But when I really get down to it, in my heart of hearts, I really do not know why I do those things. And getting to that point, and that humiliation, because it's humiliating to myself. It's called humility. The only way to grow into real humility is to accept that humility. But I don't want Bernie to know that about me. So I can't say that. I don't want to acknowledge that. I don't want Tamara to think that of me. So I won't say that, and I'll avoid it. But I'm only making myself sicker. So I have to out myself and tell on myself. And I can't do that on my own. I have to use people to help me. Okay. So you may think this is an extreme case. To us, it is not far-fetched. For this kind of thinking has been characteristic of every single one of us. We have sometimes reflected more than Jim did upon the consequences. And we think, and again, the consequences and the defective character. Think about what you're doing and the consequences of it. Usually it's not what you actually want in your life. You get some relief now. The ego only wants relief now. The building of character down the road requires sacrificing the ego now so that you can't see down there though. The thing about it is you don't even know what it looks like. But you do know what it looks like here now if you act in the ego. That's part of the problem because we always want to control. We want power in it. Sometimes we have reflected more than Jim did on the consequences, but there is always the curious mental phenomenon that parallel with our sound reasoning. There inevitably ran some insanely trivial excuse for taking the first drink or the first defect of character. Our sound reasoning failed to hold us in check. The insane idea won out. The next day we would ask ourselves in all earnestness and sincerity, how could this have happened? How could I beat the shit out of that guy yesterday? How could I have yelled at my mom yesterday at Christmas when all she said was stop swearing? Right? Like, this is it, man. How do these things happen? In some circumstances, we have gone out deliberately to get drunk, feeling ourselves justified by nervousness, anger, worry, depression, jealousy, and the alike. So back to the substance for a sec. We will always drink on the emotion. The emotion drives the trigger to want to drink because we want to suppress the emotion and the feelings. The best and the worst thing about recovery is feelings, because you have to feel them and then you get to feel them. But at first it's like, I've never felt feelings before. So I didn't know what it was like. So I was always confused on how I should be. I'm like 42 years old and I think I should be and act a certain way. No, man, you don't need to. And that's why it's so important to have a sponsor. They can tell you, dude, you've never been here before. Have you ever had sober sex in 30 years? No. Well, then how do you know what it's even like to be in love with somebody? How do you even know what it's like to have sober sex with somebody that you actually love? Have you ever loved anybody while looking at your inventory? No, you just jumped from one relationship to another. You were never single more than 3 weeks. How could you even love anybody? You think you loved them, but it was really, let's look at the truth, it was over compensated codependency overlap in your ability and your scaredness to be alone. It wasn't fucking love. Oh, you're going to say that fucking hitting her was love? You're going to say that controlling her every move was love? Oh, she controlled you. Oh, that's love? Dude, you don't even know what love is. Most of us don't even know what love is. We have to learn that over time, right? So again, what are we doing when we're looking at these things? We're exposing the old ideas, emotions, and attitudes. My inability to leave the women or the girlfriend alone because of what? Broken parts of me. It's not love at all. It's the broken part of me that I can't control because I'm powerless over, and it needs the validation and relief so bad. But when I look at the pattern every 6 months or every year, I'm with a new woman, or I can't keep a relationship because I'm not well myself, and it always started with the wrong motives. Wasn't started out with me loving me. And I will share again, water finds its own level, right? Our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane when our thinking is cleared of wrong motives. Our thought life gets placed on a higher plane, and a higher plane is love, kindness, compassion, love for yourself, love for others. And when you're vibrating at a higher level of consciousness, you attract that. And then you can build on that. But if you're vibrating down here, maybe you vibrate up here most of the time, but when you get into an intimate relationship, all your insecurities come in. Now you're vibrating down here. So you got work to do, right? But as long as you're willing to work at it and work with your sponsor and your pillars, you can slowly climb out of that. And every interaction that you have with somebody, if your motives are more pure, you can learn something and you can grow and not intentionally hurt people anymore, right? Or not intentionally even, but it's still, you're still hurting them, and you don't really have the right to, because as alcoholics, there becomes a point where you take responsibility for your illness. And if you don't take responsibility for your illness, then to me, it's negligence. It's reckless. Okay. Some instances, circumstances, we have gone out deliberately to get drunk, feeling ourselves justified by nervousness, anger, worry, depression, jealousy, or the like. We can also act in defect of character for those exact same reasons. I feel lonely. I feel lonely. I feel lonely. Fucking next thing you know, Tinder's on my phone and we're swiping right big time, right? But even in this type of beginning, we're obliged to admit that our justification for a spree was insanely insufficient in the light of what always happened. We now see that when we begin to drink deliberately instead of casually, there was little serious or effective thought during the period of premeditation of what the terrific consequences might be. Our behavior is absurd and incomprehensible with respect to the first drink, as that of an individual, say, with a passion for jaywalking. He gets his thrill out of skipping in front of fast-moving vehicles. He enjoys himself for a few years, and in spite of friendly warnings, up to this point, you would label him a foolish chap. Okay, so we're going to read the jaywalker in respect to the substance and how devastating and how blind and delusional we are to the substance. Okay, remove the substance from this to some degree and put in whatever your defect is, because it's the same thing. We do the same thing with whatever the defect are. The thing about the defects, if we keep acting out on the defects, we're picking up the drink, right? So I'm really highlighting the defective character because that's actually the root of the problem. So here's a chap having queer ideas of fun. Luck then deserts him, and he is slightly injured several times in succession. You would expect him, if he were normal, to cut it out. Presently, he is hit again, and in this time has a fractured skull. Within a week after leaving the hospital, a fast-moving trolley car breaks his arm. He tells you he has decided to stop jaywalking for good, but in a few weeks, he breaks both his legs. Okay, what's your defect? Well, I've seen men that are porn addicts, and the porn addiction has destroyed their families and their position at work, but they can't stop doing it. So this is him. Okay. I've seen guys with their anger destroy their families and destroy their positions at work. So it's anger here. It could be self-pity, could be playing the victim. Because when you play the victim and you're in self-pity, it's a different way of pushing people away through anger and like other things. It's you can see it, it's very apparent. Through self-pity, no one really wants to be around you. And you just push them away, right? And then you play the victim because nobody wants to be my friend or whatever. And then the victim never sees their part. That's why they're the victim, right? So it's like they do these things continually because they've never been able to see the patterns in their life. Until you see the patterns, you will be the jaywalker in any of your defects that you have. And eventually, you will be crushed by your own self-imposed crisis, and you will be left alone and afraid, and your suffering will become acute and constant. That's how this goes. And then when you get to that point, fucking nothing looks good like a drink, man. So on through the years, these defects, the conduct continues. What are they, man? Look at your life. Find out what they are for you. Find out what the conduct is that's continuing to keep fighting everything and everyone. In the step 4 and the 12 and 12, it talks about inventory on relationships that cause reoccurring trouble is a priority. So what's the relationship that I have that's always causing me reoccurring trouble? Is it with a woman? Is it with my mom? Is it with my dad? Is it with somebody else? Is it with them all? It very well could be. So we got to take inventory in this respect. And taking inventory with a pillar as well, or a sponsor. And looking at this shit. And then accepting some things you don't want to accept. Because your pride, the pride underneath it, it doesn't want to acknowledge some of this stuff. Because the pride makes you, it protects you, but it's actually not protecting you. It's hurting you. That's why vulnerability is so important in what we're doing. Vulnerability means like the truth. Like, okay, I'm going to tell you, Paul, the truth. And then I tell him everything. And I can't even look him in the eye because I'm so ashamed. Why? Because my ego is the shame. And my ego has the fear of him judging me, and I'm judging me, and society's ideas of how this should be is judging me. So I can't look him in the eye. But the thing about when I do it and I finish, I feel better. Why? Because I actually lived with my heart for a change. And I could actually express something that was truthful from my heart, from the core of my being. So I actually feel some real relief. And I don't have to lie about it. And that is actually what people want. And that will attract the people you want to you. But it doesn't make sense. Well, that's why the book says common sense thus becomes uncommon sense, right? Okay, so on through the years, the conduct continues, accompanied by his continual promises to stay away from that woman, or stay out of the gambling, stay out of the Grey Eagle. I'm not going to get angry anymore. I'm sorry. I'm not going to do this anymore. Continual promises, right, of whatever it is, to be careful or to keep off the streets altogether. Finally, he can no longer work. His wife gets a divorce and he's held up to ridicule. He tries every known means to get the jaywalking idea out of his head. He shuts himself in the asylum, hoping to mend his way, but the day comes out, he races in front of a fire engine, which breaks his back. Such a man would be crazy, wouldn't he? So here he is. He shuts himself in the asylum, hoping to mend his ways. He tries every known means to get this idea out of his head. We can't do it on our own. This is the essence of step 6. We must have God's help. Selfish self-centeredness, that we think is at the root of our troubles. There seems no way of entirely getting rid of it without God's help. And we must, or it kills us. This shit kills us inside as we walk earth, and we're depressed and in anxiety and resentment. I don't want to live like that. That's walking dead. And if we don't get a handle on it, it will take us out. Like that woman I was talking about who tried to off herself at 7 years. That's what happened. That's what happens. She's not an anomaly. She's a normal case, right? Such a man would be crazy, wouldn't he? You may think our illustration is too ridiculous, but yet is it? We who have been through the ringer have to admit, if we substituted alcoholism for jaywalking, the illustration would fit us exactly. However intelligent we may have been in other respects, where our thinking is involved, we have been strangely insane. It's strong language, but isn't it true? The alcoholic has no effective mental defense against the first think. His defense must come from God. So when we look at the step 10 process, it says we continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. There's my thinking. And then it says we ask God to remove it at once. So I got to be aware of what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling. The process is I go to God, boom, right now. I don't wait. I don't think about it. I don't manage it. I become aware of the process. I'm thinking about me. I'm in ego. I ask God to remove it at once. And then it says we talk to somebody immediately. That's not optional. That's not optional. But we think it's optional. And then when we finally do make the call to somebody else, we only tell them our half of the story. Because my pride and ego wants me to look okay, and I don't really want these guys to think of me like that. I want them to side with me. I want them to be resentful at this person too. So I'm only going to tell them half truth. Well, half measures the value, fuck all. If you really want to grow into the fourth dimension, you have to be rigorously honest. You can't tell a half a story. You got to tell your whole part. You got to tell where you were an asshole. You got to tell where they were the asshole. You got to tell them how it got started. If there's a backstory to this that's 2 or 3 weeks long, and that person, that pillar needs to know about the backstory because it's an important piece of what happened today, tell them the backstory. Because me as a listener, that I need all the information so I can care more about your life than your feelings. So I got to be able to get all the information so I can say, okay, here's the causes and conditions. Thank you for telling me. Now we have to look at these damaged and unsaleable goods, and hopefully you're willing to discard them promptly without regret. And you bring God in and you try to change, and maybe you got to go make an amend or whatever it is, right? So this takes like super great willingness. It takes super high level honesty, rigorous honesty, which means accurate, not our honesty, because our honesty gets us drunk. It takes super willingness, open-minded, and honesty to do this at a high level, which will take you to where you actually want to be. Some of you are thinking, yes, what you tell us is true, but it doesn't fully apply. We admit we have some of these symptoms, but we have not gone to the extremes that you fellows did, nor are we likely to. For we understand ourselves so well after what you have told us that such things cannot happen again. We have not lost everything in life through drinking, thinking, and we certainly do not intend to. Thanks for the information. And dudes, just for that paragraph again, it's just like, how many guys have I met that paragraph is like, well, I don't really need to talk to pillars. I don't really need to do the inventory. You know what? That might be good for you guys, but fuck, I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good. I'm not going to fuck up my life anymore. I know I can do this on my own. And thanks for the information. Not just with the alcohol and drugs, okay? I'm talking about all the defective character stuff. It doesn't work like that, man. Thanks for the information. Good luck. You know, buddy's like, okay, I'm 3 months sober. I'm going to the rigs and I got a new old lady. And, you know, I appreciate everything you told me. You know I called you to get your advice, Bill. But I don't really agree with you. But he called me. I told him, don't go on the rigs. You're 3 months sober. Don't get in that relationship. Okay. You know, don't take your mom's car up north. Just stay here and do recovery. Well, thanks for the advice, but I think I'm going to go. Okay. Thanks for the information, he says, and off he goes. And you know what? 8 months later, coming back, I'm right here. Oh, hey, bud, how's it going? I love it. Hey, how's it going? Good to see you. How's your job going? Oh, fuck. You know, it's kind of sadistic, right? But it's like prediction of the future. And I can predict your future alcoholics, like, and not from a God perspective. I just know the illness. 99% of the time, you take the woman, you take the job up north, and you take your mom's car, you're fucking drunk. That's a guarantee. Once in a while, it may not happen that way, but it's pretty rare, right? Pretty rare. So that may be true of certain non-alcoholic people who, though drinking foolishly and heavily at the present time, are able to stop or moderate because their brains and bodies have not been damaged like ours were. But the actual or potential alcoholic, with hardly an exception, will be absolutely unable to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge. So again, you to relinquish your defects on the basis of your own self-knowledge about how you work, it won't work. We have to have God's help. So working with God's help in your defective character is the keys to the kingdom. Just to understand the inner workings of your mind and how you are and see these patterns, that's part of it. But the other part that helps that we need is God involved in it. So I'm going to finish this paragraph and we'll shut her down. So this is a point I wish to emphasize and re-emphasize, to smash home upon you alcoholic people. It has been revealed to us at a bitter experience. Let us take another illustration. So next week, we'll read Fred's story. And Fred's story is the same as Jim's story. It's just different.